I'm proud of you. You, music, know that. I hope you do. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood turned a cardigan, a trolley, and a gentle hello into one of television's most quietly revolutionary spaces. Premiering in 1968, it invited children into a world where Fred Rogers' Mr. Rogers, Francois Clemens, Officer Clemens, Betty Aberlin's Lady Aberlin, David Newell's Mr. Siley, and a whole cast of puppets from King Friday I 13th to Daniel Striped Tiger treated feelings as seriously as breaking news and kindness as something stronger than any superhero power. Across more than 30 years and over 900 episodes, the series helped define public television music and shaped generations of children who grew up believing they were loved just as they were. Yet behind the soft piano music, hand-knit sweaters, and daily shock-changing ritual was a story of civil rights protests carried out with kiddie pools, live jazz trios playing for preschoolers, urban legends that refused to die, and a host who answered mail like every letter was a sacred trust. These are 15 shocking facts about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Stick around for number 15 to see how a simple kid series ended up as one of the most radical experiments American television has ever seen. Before we roll the trolley, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our deep dives into classic TV that refuses to fade away. Number 1. The pool scene that pushed back against segregation. Most television in 1969 did everything it could to avoid controversy. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood chose a plastic waiting pool when Fred Rogers invited Francois Clemens. Music, Franco Clemens. Hi. Welcome. Thank you. How you doing? Fine. How are you today? Fine. My feet were tired, so, music. I thought I'd just soak them for a while in this water. Does it make them feel better? It does. Would you like to try? Sure. Officer Clemens on the show to soak their feet together in a small pool on a hot day. It looked like the gentlest scene imaginable. Two men, one black and one white, sharing cool water and quiet conversation. But public pools in much of America were still battlegrounds. Segregation, hostility, and even violence had followed efforts to integrate them. In that climate, simply sharing water on national television was a statement. Rogers never delivered a speech. He didn't explain the symbolism or underline a message. He just placed his bare feet next music to Clemens, talked softly, and then handed him a towel as if nothing about it was remarkable. Music. For viewers who understood the context, the message was unmistakable. Sharing space, sharing water, and sharing care was normal, and racism was what needed to change for children. It simply normalized a world where a black police officer and a white host shared music, comfort without comment. They revisited the moment in 1993, long after that first episode, quietly repeating a lesson that America still hadn't fully learned. In a show built on small gestures, a plastic music pool became one of television's clearest images of everyday courage. Number 2. A future Batman started out behind the trolley. Years before Gotham City, there was Pittsburgh, and instead of a cape, Michael Keaton had a headset and a production checklist. In the mid-1970s, Keaton worked on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood as a behind-the-scenes utility player. He ran props, helped move sets, and operated the Neighborhood Trolley. Michael Keaton actually worked for the program before he was an actor. He worked on our floor crew and he ran the trolley. At a time when he was just another young local performer trying to get a foothold in television, his job was making Fred Rogers' world run smoothly. He didn't just stay off camera. Keaton also appeared on screen as one of the Flying Zucchini Brothers in a circus episode, diving into the playful absurdity of the neighborhood of Make-Believe. Later, when he'd gone on to roles in films and eventually to the cowl of Batman, Keaton looked back on those early days with real affection. He described Rogers as one of the most genuinely kind and consistent people he'd ever worked with. Music. A rare endorsement from someone who would go on to see the full spectrum of Hollywood personalities and production styles. The man who later portrayed one of cinema's darkest, most brooding heroes began his television life making sure the trolley hit its marks and the puppets had their cues. Number 3. His ideal weight was a hidden love message. For more than 3 decades, Fred Rogers kept his weight at a steady 143 pounds. It wasn't a fitness gimmick or a publicity stunt. For him, it was language. Rogers loved the numerical rhythm of 143. Music. 1 letter in I, for in love, 3 in you. There's the 143 music way to say I love you. To him, 143 became a simple, almost childlike code for the phrase he spent his life trying to convey. Maintaining that number on the scale turned a routine health check into a daily reminder of purpose. It became a quiet, private ritual. While much of America obsessed over diets, exercise fads, and appearance, Rogers' music transformed something as mundane as weighing himself into a moment of reflection about his calling and his relationship to his audience. Years later, the state of Pennsylvania formalized that little code into 143-day each May, celebrating kindness and neighborliness in honor of a man who managed to turn even numbers into a form of affection. Number 4. The iconic sneakers solved a sound problem before they became a ritual. One of the defining images of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is the daily transformation. The blazer comes off, the cardigan and sneakers go on, and the pace of the world seems to slow. That simple act became a symbol of shifting from public life to a more intimate, attentive space with children. Please, won't you be my neighbor? But the original reason for those soft canvas shoes was technical, music, not symbolic. The studio floors amplified every step Rogers took in dress shoes. Microphones picked up each click and echo, threatening to turn quiet conversations into accidental tap dance routines. The solution was straightforward. Switched to sneakers that moved silently across the set. What began as a production fix gradually turned into one of the most comforting rituals in television history. Children watched Rogers change his shoes and understood that this was their time. The squeaks and clatter of the outside world were gone. In their place was the gentle shuffle of someone settling in to listen. Over time, the sneakers came to represent something far beyond sound engineering. They marked the boundary between demands and presence, between rushing and paying attention. Behind the scenes, the motivation was practical. On screen, it became poetry. Number 5. One man, many voices. The neighborhood of Make-Believe was almost all Rogers. The neighborhood of Make-Believe felt like its own small society populated by royalty, mischief-makers, and gentle dreamers. King Friday the 13th spoke with imperious certainty. Daniel Striped Tiger whispered his worries. Lady Elaine Fairchild brought unpredictable energy to every scene. Behind nearly all of those voices was Fred Rogers himself. Music. Rather than assembling a large voice cast, the production relied on Rogers to inhabit character after character. Through minor shifts in pitch, rhythm, and personality, he carried most of the puppet ensemble, building a chorus of perspectives from a single throat. This choice did more than save on casting. It allowed Rogers to explore different emotional angles with music, rare intimacy. Through the shy Daniel, he could voice vulnerability. Through King Friday, he could dramatize stubbornness and authority. Through Lady Elaine, he could play with rule-breaking and change. Children watching didn't know they were listening to one actor perform a repertory company. They simply experienced a neighborhood where many inner voices, fearful, bold, compassionate, curious, were allowed to speak in the hands of another broadcaster. Puppets, music, might have been simple comic relief. With Rogers providing their voices, they became pieces of his own emotional vocabulary handed directly to his audience. Music. Number 6. Those famous cardigans were handmade gifts from his mother. The sweaters were as much a part of Mr. Rogers' presence as his voice. Buttoned carefully, chosen with unhurried care, they signaled warmth before he spoke a word. They weren't music, the work of a costumiering department. Rogers' mother, Nancy, knitted them. This is a picture of my mother. She knits the sweaters that I wear when we have our television visits. Season after season, viewers watched him put on garments that had been created stitch by stitch by the same hands that had once dressed him as a child. They were holiday gifts and acts of everyday care that followed him into the studio. When Nancy Rogers passed away in 1981, the quiet supply of new sweaters stopped. Behind the scenes, the production suddenly faced an unusual problem. A wardrobe so deeply grounded in personal history that it couldn't easily be reproduced. By then, the cardigans had become visually inseparable from the man wearing them. They embodied family, continuity, and music constancy in a way that no designer could replicate on demand. Today, one of those original sweaters lives in the Smithsonian, preserved alongside artifacts that chart American cultural history. For decades, millions of children saw them simply as Mr. Rogers' clothes. In reality, every buttoned cuff and soft collar carried the story of a mother's care extended into public life. Number 7. A gorilla memorized his ritual and gave it back to him. In 1998, long before short animal clips dominated screens, Fred Rogers met one of his most unusual admirers, Coco, the gorilla known for her use of sign language. Coco had watched recordings of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood repeatedly. When Rogers visited her research facility, music cameras captured a moment that distilled what his show had meant to viewers across species and generations. They actually watched Mr. Rogers' neighbor, the gorillas, and Fred Rogers went to California and actually went into the cage with Coco the gorilla. Coco approached him and gently removed his shoes, echoing the familiar ritual she had seen hundreds of times. Then she embraced him and signed, "Love." For all the studies and debates about children's television, that scene showed something simple and profound. Even a non-human viewer observing only images and rhythms had understood that this person represented safety and affection. A gorilla, through memorized routine and touch, reflected the central act of the show back to its creator. Quick pause. If these behind-the-scenes stories from the neighborhood are bringing back memories, take a moment to hit like and subscribe before the trolley heads back into the tunnel. It helps this channel keep revisiting the shows that once made after-school television feel a little kinder. And tell us in the comments how old you were when you first realized Mr. Rogers was doing something very different from every other show around him. Now back to the myths, music, and quiet revolutions behind Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Number 8. The toughest urban legend, Mr. Rogers the Secret Soldier. For years, a strange story followed Fred Rogers from playground to playground. According to the rumor, the soft-spoken host was secretly a decorated military sniper. His colorful sweaters allegedly hiding tattoos from a violent past. It was the kind of tale that thrived long before social media, whispered between classmates, repeated with conviction and unburdened by evidence. The contrast between the rumor and the reality on screen was precisely what made it spread. Surely, some insisted no one could simply be that kind without a darker counterweight. In truth, Rogers never served in the armed forces. During the years when other young men were drafted or enlisted, he pursued seminary studies and began to shape his ideas about using television music to support children emotionally. The legend may have tangled his name with that of another Fred Rogers who did have a military record. Or it may simply have emerged from the cultural tendency to search for hidden extremes behind gentleness. The persistence of the myth says less about Rogers than it does about the world around him. A world often more comfortable believing in secret violence than in open, sustained kindness. Number 9. A live jazz trio gave the neighborhood its emotional pulse. Beneath the quiet conversations and puppet dialogues of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was a sophisticated musical backbone. Laughter. Very nice. Instead of relying on canned tracks or stock cues, the production used live jazz. Pianist Johnny Costa, often called the Bach of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, led a small trio that played through tapings for decades. With piano, bass, and drums, they improvised transitions, underscored moods, and responded in real time to the pacing of each scene. For children, the music simply felt natural. Warm chords under reassuring words, playful runs when puppets appeared, gentle motifs returning like old friends. For adults listening closely, the complexity was undeniable. Rogers had chosen to surround his messages with one of America's great art forms: music. The decision gave the show a musical depth most children's programming never attempted. While many series stitched together pre-recorded themes to meet production schedules, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood treated its score like another character capable of expressing feelings that words alone could not. Without fanfare, preschoolers across the country were introduced to jazz phrasing and harmony. Their sense of timing and emotion shaped by musicians improvising in a studio built for children. Number 10. Answering every letter turned fame into a daily conversation. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood reached millions of homes, but Fred Rogers refused to let his relationship with viewers remain abstract. In an age before email, he